Okay, now let's go to the acting categories. The 4 acting categories. Of the 4, there's one that is incredibly easy, and there are 3 that are tricky, and then there are 2 that are especially difficult.
Yeah.
And so I do think, on par with what we were saying about, interestingly enough, short films, I do feel that your calls on these 3 races, specifically Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Supporting Actress, might have a big effect on whether or not you succeed in your Oscar pool or not.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. Let's first talk about Best Actress in a Supporting Role. The nominees are Elle Fanning for Sentimental Value, Inga Ipsdotter-Lilius for Sentimental Value, Amy Madigan for Weapons, Wunmi Mosaku for Sinners, and Teyana Taylor for One Battle After Another. And so I think most people are in agreement that this is a 3-legged race.
Yeah, it's a little bit all over the place, which is kind of exciting. But
Well, minus the sentimental value actresses.
Right.
It's a 3-legged race between all the Warner Brothers actresses.
Yeah, it's going to come down to Warner Brothers win again.
Exactly. Someone from Warner Brothers will be winning this category. Right now we have Amy Madigan with the Critics' Choice win and the SAG win, most importantly, recently. She actually did not get an eye for a BAFTA, which I don't think is insignificant.
Right.
We have Wunmi Mosaku with a BAFTA win, and we have Teyana Taylor with a Golden Globe win. So
also important to mention that of the 3, Amy Madigan is the only one coming in for her second nomination.
Right. She's the veteran in the category.
She's the veteran there.
She actually makes history by having the longest gap in between nominations.
Is that
40
true?
years. 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Her last nomination was in 1985.
Really interesting. Yeah. I think also important to mention, obviously we know Weapons is a horror film. We also know that Weapons didn't do well overall at the Academy. This is the only nomination for Weapons.
I think it's important. Okay, let's start unpacking it. Amy Madigan is the favorite amongst most pundits. And I understand why. She's the veteran in the category. It's her second nomination. This very much feels like a nomination where it's the last opportunity they have to give Amy Madigan an Oscar. That being said, okay, it is the film's only nomination, and it's not like the film couldn't have pulled off.
Oh, certainly not. I mean,
a nomination elsewhere. I mean, it did get an eye for the PGA.
It was a favorite for makeup. It was nominated for the PGA. It was nominated for the Writers Guild Award. And I mean, at the end of the day, it could have gotten an eye for screenplay. Yeah, it got squeezed out by a film like F1, which Plan B was just better equipped to get that nomination.
But I think there's another aspect to it, which is Weapons was always going to have a difficult time mustering, for example, a Best Picture nomination. It was always much more likely that they were going to nominate something that's familiar to the Best Picture category, like a race car driving film like F1. Weapons is very much a mainstream, popular horror film, and not in the sense of, for example, The Substance, which has this art house band premiering at Cannes. Just sort of the producers that were involved with that, a very international sort of product. This is very much made by the studios for the purpose of making money. It achieved its purpose, but it's not what would typically get nominated at the Academy Awards. It's not what would typically get nominated for Best Picture, and it's certainly not what would even get nominated for acting. So the fact that Amy Madigan is there is a big deal, but I think the fact that she's the only one that's there is also revelatory in the sense that it proves what I'm saying. This isn't the type of thing that gets this sort of Oscar attention. I'm glad that she has been able to make it as far as she has. And I think that's, again, nothing to sneeze at. But I think she has several detractors. I think a lot of people are going off of a SAG win. And while I don't think that that's, again, insignificant, it reminds me a lot of the, believe it or not, the Demi Moore win for The Substance.
Yeah.
In the sense that...
At the SAG, you mean?
At the SAG. Again, another horror film, kind of quasi-horror film that managed to pull off the feat at the SAG because I think the SAG is more populist and they were more in love with the narrative of having Demi Moore win or have her moment. And so even if technically, like Weapons, it was the film's only nomination, Best Actress last year, they were more okay embracing a horror film for a win in the Best Actress category. But as we saw when it came to the Oscars, they wanted something else. They wanted something. They wanted a Mikey Madison that was part of a Best Picture winner. They wanted something that is more in line of what they with what they usually would cite and nominate. And let's not forget, we've talked about this in the past. Every win for the Academy, especially in the acting categories, is like an endorsement. So in a way, if you look at it through that lens, it's hard to picture Amy Madigan winning for Weapons when what exactly are you endorsing there? You know, she's playing a witch, you know, it's campy, it's fun, you know, it's kind of funny, it's sinister, but it's not the kind of thing that they would, you know, run to brandish with an Oscar win. Mm-hmm. It's just not, you know, in a way it feels like the win is the nomination,
right?
Sort of beating the odds. But yeah, that troubles me how similar I see the Demi Moore win to the Amy Madigan win. Don't you see that?
I mean, I see some overlap in what you're saying. I think that's a compelling argument.
Right. And I think that it's very rare to win an Academy Award as the film's only nomination.
Yeah, I mean, we looked back a little bit and it's not impossible. I think from what we were able to investigate, I think the most recent example is when Julianne Moore is able to win for Still Alice, and it's the film's only nomination, and she wins Actress in a Leading Role. Other good examples that we were able to dig up included Christopher Plummer in Beginners in 2011 for Supporting Actor on his second nomination. Penelope Cruz for Vicky Cristina Barcelona in a Woody Allen film, only nomination on her second nomination.
Forrest Whitaker.
For Penelope Cruz, Forrest Whitaker as Idi Amin for The Last King of Scotland was able to win Best Actor. I do feel when you look at those films as a whole, Beginners, Vicky Cristina Barcelona, Last King of Scotland, Still Alice, they are more immediately appealing films to Oscar voters.
And it still feels of the fabric of what they usually like to cite for
very
an award
much
win.
In the fabric of what is typical fodder for the Oscar race. And case in point, when you look at someone like Julianne Moore for Still Alice, she does end up winning the award across the spectrum, whether it was the Globe, the SAG, the BAFTA. Very much the same case for Forrest Whitaker and Christopher Plummer. The only one who had trouble sort of running the gamut and winning all those awards was really Penelope Cruz for Vicky Cristina Barcelona.
But that was a weird
that's
year.
A really unique situation,
right, because Kate Winslet was in supporting category for Winslet The Reader.
Kate Winslet actually ended up winning the majority of the awards for supporting actress in terms of the televised awards, but she got bumped up into lead. Right. So that's like a situation that has like a little asterisk next to it. And then I think the other thing to talk about here beyond that and how Amy Madigan in Weapons isn't a great fit, I want to add to the element that you were discussing about the horror element is the idea that it's been announced that they're going to pursue, or Warner Brothers was going to pursue before Paramount bought it, or attempted to buy it, more films in sort of the Weapons universe and possibly a Gladys film, and just the idea that the character is popular enough and has crossed over into mainstream culture enough that they're going to adopt it as, IP for further movies. I don't know that is attractive to many voters.
I agree.
That's another element. And then I think something else to talk about is just the idea that Amy Madigan did make the long list at BAFTA, but failed to get the nomination.
With 6 spots.
With 6 spots. And it's not a killer, right? Because Regina King was able to score a win at the Oscars for If Beale Street Could Talk without that BAFTA nomination. Even without a SAG nomination, she was able to score that win, just a Golden Globe win. But I do think, again, just the nature of the movie of Weapons, it's not great news in my opinion. Right. So I think that's everything going against Amy Madigan. I mean, we also shouldn't dismiss the idea that Amy Madigan won the SAG, sure, but she's the longtime partner of esteemed actor Ed Harris, who has been nominated several times, who is an extraordinary actor, and who's, I think, beloved in the industry and beloved amongst his peers. And could that be a factor? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe.
Like I said, I think it bears repeating. I don't see a win for Amy Madigan in Weapons to be, a kind of brandishing endorsement win that they typically go for. And like I said, I don't consider the populist vote at the SAG to be enough to convince me otherwise. I don't like that she's alone, that the film had potential to pop up somewhere and she didn't, or it didn't. And I think that there are films here that are more valued and more loved than Weapons is.
Yeah.
And One Battle After Another is the favorite. Sinners is the second favorite. And Sentimental Value has 9 nominations. Right. So it's hard to see why in a scenario where they have films that they clearly loved, they would go for the film that is by itself and the film's only nomination. Add to that again, can we really picture, the Amy Madigan role, the Aunt Gladys role, having an Oscar? When you really start to look at the movie and think about all the things that are in that film and all the, the witchcraft of it all, right, and the stabbing your face with a fork of it all, it's really commercially appealing.
Right.
But is it appealing to awards bodies, or at least to the Academy Awards? I'm really unsure. I'm really unsure.
Right.
Why wouldn't they place their vote in this category for a film that they really liked?
Right.
And I just don't know that Amy Madigan as an actor is at that stage like a Christopher Plummer or like a Julianne Moore.
That's a big deal, yeah.
They feel like, well, you know what? I need to give this actor an Oscar right now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And I also want to sort of piggyback off that point. When Christopher Plummer finally wins for Beginners, like he was writing the remaining sentiment of 2009, just 2 years previous, when there was a tremendous amount of energy, I think, in that race to get Christopher Plummer nominated for the first time for The Last Station. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like there was almost this sort of desperation of, we cannot go Christopher Plummer's entire career without nominating him a single time. And he was able to get that nomination for in 2009. Obviously, the race was sewn up because of Christoph Waltz. But when the opportunity arises again, right, in this little tiny charmer of a film, right, that's also, it's idiosyncratic, but again, emotionally, I think it's more far-reaching than Weapons is, which I think, as you're right, is going to be perceived as more of a popcorn movie.
Yeah.
I think that is a difference maker. Some people talked about Ruth Gordon, for example, as being a good predecessor for Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
But here's a couple of things. Rosemary's Baby in general fared better than Weapons, right? It was still a screenplay nominee.
Yeah.
Right. And so I do think that when you have Blue Moon getting in for screenplay over Weapons, essentially out of nowhere for Robert, who is, again, not a screenwriter with tremendous amount of credits, I think it does demonstrate that there is some resistance to welcoming Weapons.
A film like Weapons.
Yeah. So it's tough for me to think that a writer's branch that resisted the nomination is going to jump to give Amy Madigan the win. A makeup branch that resisted a nomination or an inclusion on the long list is going to rush to give Amy Madigan the win.
Right. And I feel like her biggest asset would probably be actors,
right,
as we saw. But again, there are films here that actors clearly really like.
Yes. So let's jump to a couple of those adversaries that might really have the advantage over
let's look at Teyana Taylor for One Battle After Another, who I think is tremendous and would be my personal pick from this list, which I think is a very strong list, by the way. She's amazing in One Battle After Another. What a shame that her, counterpart like Regina Hall couldn't make it as well into this list.
Right.
But I think Teyana Taylor, what we're seeing right now, which should be a sort of de facto winner in a way, because it's such a memorable part. She's amazing in it. It's a really true supporting role, is that I think there's a complex material behind the role that I think some people are turned off by, or some people don't necessarily want to give a win to. And again, let's remember that idea of endorsement. Every win is an endorsement. And, Teyana Taylor's character is prickly and she's complex in a way that I think is really powerful in the film, but in a way that doesn't immediately translate to award success. So I'm not surprised that she's sort of fallen by the wayside with people like Amy Madigan and someone else we'll talk about soon. But I think that that's a big factor, an obstacle that she faces, alongside the fact that she doesn't have many film credits.
I think that's the biggest one.
She begins as she started out as an R&B singer, an R&B presence. She doesn't have a buttload of credits for a lot of voters. This is their first introduction to her, and so when you're putting her alongside people like Amy Madigan and Wunmi Mosaku and Elle Fanning, actors with a more established career, I think it would be hard for some actors to, want to give Teyana Taylor the win over some of these more established actors. a name that comes to mind rather recently is someone like Ariana DeBose, who technically won with very few credits. But that being said, the role that she was inhabiting was sort of a tailor-made Oscar role because of its history.
It's very much
Moreno win and whatnot.
It's very much a win, as you said, an endorsement. It's just a win that further cements the iconography of the Rita Moreno.
No, but I also do think that the credits. I don't think that the credits is the biggest reason why she's missing out, because I think in a world where it was an easier character to root for. And again, by the way, I think it's a very potent character that PTA has drawn in his script. But if it were an easier character for general audiences to root for, I think she would have an easier time, distinguishing herself amongst the pack. I mean, I think what's hurting the most is the role that she's playing.
I think you're right. It's the nature of the role. When we talk about the idea of an endorsement, it doesn't mean that antagonists cannot win.
Right.
You have anti-heroes like Daniel Plainview who win, and you have antagonists like, I remember Monique's wonderful win in Precious. Those performances can still win, but the film usually has to have a certain tone with the way they approach that character that sort of eases the Academy Award member into voting a win there.
Right.
And I don't think that that's the approach that One Battle After Another takes for Teyana Taylor's character and Perfidia, who again really does not show up after a certain point in the film. I think it adds complexity to the piece, but it's certainly not, the closing scene that Monique has in Precious, right? Which really tries to humanize her. At the same time, the film certainly understands her as an antagonist, and they're not endorsing, this is the character that we should look up for, but they're very much comfortable with the way the film framed her by the end, if that makes sense.
Right.
And
Perfidia,
that's just,
you mean Perfidia?
No, I'm talking about Monique's character.
Monique.
Monique's character in Precious. And I'm saying that that's something that's missing in One Battle After Another, partly because there is a restraint to try to, I think there's a restraint on the part of One Battle After Another to judge Perfidia.
100%.
Which again, I think is a virtue of the piece, but it's not necessarily what they're comfortable with.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So I think that's what she's struggling with the most. And so in my mind, and in your mind as well, and we've talked about this in the past, the perfect candidate for this category is Wunmi Mosaku for Sinners, who is a BAFTA winner. Let's see, she doesn't have the detractor that Teyana Taylor has with regards to the role that she has. In fact, she actually represents some of the most beautiful things about Sinners.
Yep.
The warmth and the grace, and there's a light to this movie that's really embalmed in her presence, and what her character signifies. On top of that, unlike Teyana Taylor, she has very reputable filmography. She's, I believe, almost 40, but she's worked in TV and film. She already was a BAFTA nominee prior to getting nominated for Sinners and winning. She has a respectable filmography, which I think is going to add points when it comes to, who voters are going to vote for in this category.
Yeah, I agree.
And unlike Amy Madigan, she's in a Best Picture favorite. She's in Sinners. So why would we, quote unquote, why would voters vote for the witch in Weapons when they could, quote unquote, this is a simplification, but vote for the witch in Sinners? I don't see the logic there.
Which probably, as you said, has a little bit more profundity in the way that it was written on the page for Wunmi. I think you're right. I think technically, I don't know, the role and the performer are in that sweet spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I also like the idea of giving it to an actor like Wunmi, who has that filmography, but she has an entire career ahead of her. You know what I mean? I feel like it reminds me of the wins that they've been doing lately. Like, as much as I would love a win for Amy Madigan, I feel like we haven't been seeing that kind of win too often, right? Where a more veteran actor finally has a chance and they end up getting onto the stage. It hasn't really ended up that way.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's Annette Bening in Naiad or Demi Moore in The Substance, it seems to me like in this particular category, supporting actress, they're trying to get younger performers who still have a substantial amount of time to develop their filmography and the roles they tackle into lead roles and other types of films.
100%. But I also think that's something that we're seeing within, the acting races as of late is the contender that tends to win is in the movie that I really liked.
Yeah.
Is in the movie that I really loved. And I was thinking about, for example, when you were speaking, rather recently, Olivia Colman versus Glenn Close. Glenn Close being in the film, the film's only nomination, clearly the more deserving actor in terms of being owed.
Yes.
But what won out instead was the movie that I liked more. I liked The Favorite more than I liked The Wife. And that was already obvious when The Wife only got one nomination.
And to me, I love that you're bringing that up, because to me, that's a substantial barometer for where we're at in terms of how the Academy behaves. Can we really say that Amy Madigan is going to win a supporting actress Oscar, which I understand is not the same as the lead Oscar, on her second nomination with the longest gap between nominations at the Oscars? So she already has a record here. She already has the longest gap between nominations in the same category, I believe, supporting actress. And we're going to give her a win for playing Aunt Gladys in Weapons, the film's only nomination. But we could not give a win, and we have yet to give a win, to Glenn Close. And she wasn't even able to win for The Wife. Right. And again, The Wife is tailor-made for an Oscar, right?
Exactly.
And so like that logic doesn't hold for me. And you know what I love about that is The Wife happens after Julianne Moore, after Christopher Plummer, after Penelope Cruz, almost sort of like this was something that was easier to happen before 2015.
Yeah.
And since then, it's gotten a little bit harder. Yeah. And so if Glenn Close can't pull this off with a SAG win and a Globe win and being Glenn Close in the leading actress race for The Wife, can Amy Madigan really do this?
For Weapons.
For Weapons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think it's a really big obstacle. I still can't see it. And especially when you have someone as perfect in this category as Wunmi Mosaku.
Right.
It's another win for Sinners. I think her speech was beautiful at the BAFTA ceremony. It felt like in the room, people were genuinely happy to have her see her have this moment.
Oh, yeah.
I think it would be a win that they would be very happy to endorse.
I mean,
do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. You and I had always predicted that Wunmi was going to turn the tide. We had thought SAG time, but instead it ends up happening at BAFTA. At SAG still ends up voting in Amy Madigan for the win. But I will say, as you said, SAG can be more populist. And the fact that she is Amy Madigan, an actor who has been on television, on movies, in all kinds of genres and all kinds of roles.
She never got a chance to get a SAG nomination.
She never had a chance to get a SAG nomination before. She's the partner of Ed Harris. All these things possibly could have broken in favor for her. But like we said, when you add to that the voting membership, individuals in other branches, that I think you're right. The idea that Sinners is the more favored movie could end up being what breaks the race in Wunmi's favor.
And I also want to say one quick thing about Amy Madigan is that I see the BAFTA snub as being largely more reflective of how Amy Madigan doesn't have the international voters. She doesn't get the international voters to vote for her,
right?
Predominantly. It'll be mostly domestic American voters,
right?
And so, who will the foreign voters go to? Well, they'll go to any of the other four: Sentimental Value, which is a foreign film,
right,
and Sinners in One Battle, which are loved across the board, both domestically and worldwide,
right.
So again,
and Wunmi, of course, is more of an international actor as well.
And Wunmi is an international actor as well,
right?
So, all that being said, there's a lot of eyes on this category. It's interesting to see a three-person race. It would make sense to give One Battle After Another a win here, an acting win. Maybe it would make more sense here than an actor or supporting actor, technically. But given everything we've talked about, I think Wunmi Mosaku is the perfect person for this category.
I would agree. And I think there are consequences to that, so that if you see Wunmi Mosaku win this award early in the night or midway into the night, it could be a harbinger for how well Sinners is going to do overall. We'll continue to discuss this when we...
Or vice versa, if you see Teyana Taylor wins this.
Right. Or if you see Amy Madigan win this. Yeah. Again, it could be just this is one of those races that might indicate where the night is headed. I do think that if Wunmi ends up winning this, a very interesting thing happens that we'll discuss further as we head into races like Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor. But Sinners being able to capture an acting win, especially an early one, would be an amazing sign for a potential upset in bigger categories. So watch out for that. So I think we're saying...
our predicted winner for Best Supporting Actress is Wunmi Mosaku for Sinners, and the spoiler is Amy Madigan for Weapons.
If you've been enjoying the Academy Anonymous podcast and want to support the work we're doing, there's a voluntary support link in the show notes. Totally optional. Just a way to help us keep the podcast going. Thank you for listening.
The music on this episode, entitled Cool Cats, was graciously provided by Kevin MacLeod and Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. http://creativcommons.org/licenses/by/3.0.
Disclaimer. The Academy Anonymous podcast is in no way affiliated or endorsed by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.